You're tuned into the hottest paranormal life show on YouTube, Into the Fringe, where we discuss lost civilizations, UFOs, cryptids, unsolved mysteries, megalithic structures, extraterrestrials, interdimensional portals, time skips, and more. Don't change that channel, because now you are leaving the mainstream and entering into the fringe. Greetings, followers. It is I, Cardinal Sin, and welcome to Into the Fringe number 41, the Thanksgiving edition. And our guest tonight is Tessa B. Dick. Tessa B. Dick, the fifth wife of science fiction author Philip K. Dick, earned a B.A. degree in communications and an M.A. degree in English literature from Chapman University. She taught English for 12 years and has been selling and publishing her stories, poems, articles, photographs, and novels since 1969. Tessa began her writing career as a journalist, writing for magazines and newspapers. Her husband, Philip K. Dick, encouraged her to write fiction after he read her first short story. She worked with him on his later novels, including Valis and A Scanner Darkly. Since then, Tessa has produced a variety of poems and stories, as well as a murder mystery and several memoirs. Two of her memoirs have been published in Italian translations, and her surrealist novel, The Darkening of the Light, is currently in the process of translation. Some of her shorter works can be found in the online magazine PKD Otaku. Welcome, Tessa B. Dick, to Into the Fringe.
To be here.
It's wonderful to have you. I'm sorry that we didn't get your internet to work out, but this is almost as good.
Almost. And since you can't see me, I don't have to brush my hair or get out of my jammies.
Or put on any makeup or anything.
Makeup. I wear that at weddings and funerals.
I thought you were going to say something like that.
Well, Granny said if you paint your face when you're young, you'll have to paint your face when you're old.
I've never heard that.
Well, I have. Anyway.
That's very interesting. So let's go ahead and get right to it. I understand that you saw a UFO in 1960. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah. I was 6 years old, and Mom told me I must have imagined it. But my older and smarter brother also saw it. And I hadn't thought about it in years until he brought it up in conversation, wondering about what it was. And I knew it had to be August of 1960 because he got a nice telescope for his 9th birthday, and that's why we were outside after dark. He was trying out his telescope. Well, we talked about it, and yeah, Mom tried to tell him that he imagined it, that it wasn't real. Or maybe it was the full moon. Sometimes it looks orange. But, you know, I've checked the maps, and the moon does not rise in the north.
Right.
We were looking north. It was a glowing red-orange globe, and it came over the back fence and seemed to be coming down into our yard. And the next thing I know, it's gone, and Mom is calling us in and throwing a fit because we took so long to answer her and come back into the house. So just, before COVID, I know that, but really recently, I came across actually an ad for a book called UFOs Over California.
Uh-huh.
And it had an excerpt about the Red Bluff incident in which thousands of people all over California and Baja saw these glowing red objects in the sky. Some were globes and some were box-shaped, and there were apparently thousands of sightings. And it did get into the newspapers. And this book has a whole chapter about it. It's the Preston Dennett series.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so of course I had to buy the book, and I'm very happy with it. The book is on cardstock, so the pages don't tear. It'll last forever.
Right.
And it has other interesting UFO articles. So anyway, it was real, apparently. But why was it coming down into our backyard?
Do you remember what happened after it came down into your backyard?
I suspect that we have some missing time because Mom insisted that we had taken too long to respond when she called us to come in. And we thought it was just immediately. You know, we heard her calling and we said, we're coming, and we came in.
And how long did she say that you were missing?
She didn't specify, just a long, long time, and sent us to our rooms.
Of course.
Bad. Yeah. And when we tried to talk about it, Mom insisted we had imagined it, or it must have been the full moon. And there was actually a full moon around that time. I'm not sure of the exact date. I know it was early August. Anywhere from the 4th to the 15th. But it still doesn't rise in the north.
So, do you have any other memories that you remembered by yourself or with your siblings about anything after that?
Not related to the glowing red orb, but I had a number of what I used to call dreams, but I think they were probably false memories, because I would have had to be in two places at the same time for those things to happen. And they were not dreamlike. They seemed real. They seemed like memories.
Do you bilocate much?
Not anymore. I don't think so, anyway. But I think it's actually more related to a human cause rather than something from outer space. You see, some students from UCLA, graduate students, conducted an experiment at our grammar school, and I wasn't sure that asked my brother, and he said, "Oh yeah," and there years later there was an article in Scientific American all about it, so I tracked that down, and it was weird because our parents were never told about it. They had no idea, and they should have been asked to sign a waiver,
Mm-hmm.
given permission. They didn't even know about the study, but it was supposed to be about the relationship between self-esteem and leadership, and it was a longitudinal study. That means they followed their subjects for years, and my brother and I were both subjects in it.
Now, Tessa, we have a pretty intermediate audience, but for those of us that are not familiar with the term, can you explain what a longitudinal study is?
Well, it follows the subjects over a period of years. In the case of children, it usually follows them till they're either in college or starting a career. And I was 7 years old when the study began, and I have I have evidence that would convince me, but it would not convince you. But I'm certain that they did follow me through high school.
And do you know who these people were that were following you through high school?
Well, apparently it had something to do with a very large study out of, I think it was UC Berkeley. Without the book in front of me, I can't recall the head researcher's name, Stanley something, but it was quite a famous study. And, it was, had to do with the development of children into adulthood, looking at their personalities over time and how successful they became.
And at what time did you notice that they stopped following you, or was there some sort of final session or meeting that you knew it would be over?
I was told that I was being kicked out of the program. First, because I was uncooperative, and second, because I was remembering more than I was supposed to remember.
Now, what do you mean by supposed to remember?
Well, I'm certain that my memories were messed with, and many of them have to be false. As I said, I would have to be in two places at the same time for those things to happen. But I do know that in the original study, when I was 7 years old, they were teaching us something that had to be remote viewing.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Before we do, I just wanted to let everybody know that we are giving away a copy of Tessa's book at the end of our show. It's the one that's on the screen now, and it's called Tessa B. Dick, Conversations with Philip K. Dick. Tessa, before we go into a deeper dive into the paranormal, can you tell us a little bit about that book?
Okay, I just zoned out. It's My Life on the... No, the Conversations. Okay. I have had some complaints because it doesn't go in chronological order. I organized it more by topic and tone, but it's my recall of conversations that Phil actually had, not only with me, but also with friends and acquaintances. He had many weird experiences of his own, starting in early childhood, including people who helped him but then vanished. They didn't walk away, they just suddenly were not there.
Oh, they literally vanished.
Yeah.
Wow.
And things of that nature. He was very close to his favorite aunt, Marion, and she was a psychic medium. She would go into a trance and channel spirits. So Phil was not at all unfamiliar with the paranormal when he suddenly saw that pink beam in 1974.
Right.
He tried to make out as if he knew nothing and this was a brand new experience, but really it was more the culmination of a lifetime of seeking answers to the basic questions like, why are we here? Who put us here? Where are we going when we leave the earth? That sort of thing.
Sort of existential questions.
Yes, and he borrowed from many traditions. Sometimes he claimed to be a Gnostic, other times he was a Zen Buddhist, but most of the time he was an Episcopalian, which is like a Catholic but without the Pope.
Right.
Right.
It's a Church of England for Americans.
Yeah, but without the Queen.
Right. All right. Well, we certainly do appreciate your giving away the book tonight. And we do have several topics to discuss. I have up on the screen Dim Reflection of Philip K. Dick. Would you like to say anything about that book?
I thought it was out of print.
Well, it's up on Amazon.
Oh, well, I think that's probably the one I expanded when I wrote Philip K. Dick, Remembering Firebright.
Uh-huh.
So maybe I left it up so people could get a taste of it for a lower price. I've been writing these books for 20 years, so some of them are quite dim in my mind. And actually, I wrote one in around 1990. Back when I had a manual typewriter and paper.
Actually, it does say that it's unavailable. So I've moved the author page onto the screen so people can check out all the different books that you have. And
Awesome.
we're looking at among others, Fallen Angels, more on the exegesis of Philip K. Dick, Conversations with Philip K. Dick, Remembering Firebright, Cookbook for the Kitchen Challenged. That's one I should probably get. And a couple of your books of poetry. And I would like to ask you about the research studies of children that you mentioned, that you noticed that they followed you into high school. This also happened to Phil quite separately and in different decades. Is that right?
Yes. In Phil's case, his mother enrolled him in a study of gifted children. I think the head researcher was Louis Terman, who helped develop the original IQ test.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Phil had an IQ of about 120. His mother had him tested, so she enrolled him in that study, and they would periodically come and interview him as he was growing up. And when he turned 18 and they came to his high school, he told them to go away. He was not doing it anymore. But Phil said that they still followed his career because he was mentioned in the literature that they published. But he dropped out of the study because he did not want to be a guinea pig.
Interesting. So later, obviously, the two of you compared notes.
Well, somewhat. But Phil didn't suspect anything too weird about the study of him. He just thought it was elitist, snobbish, and really, we used to say that your IQ and $1 would get you a cup of coffee, but now it's more like $5.
Right.
Anyway, for 1 year of high school, my mother put me into this school that claimed to be for gifted children, but it was mostly for children whose parents could afford the tuition. But I had a free ride scholarship, and I know they were studying me.
What can you tell us about the darkening of the light?
Oh, that's my novel, my surrealist novel. It's basically a series of dreams by people who are in the hospital and unconscious, a husband and wife separately, although it's possible that only one of them is actually dreaming and the other is just a character in the dream. But they go through things like Dante's Divine Comedy and Mozart's Magic Flute. But it's actually got a lot of humor, kind of like a Philip K. Dick novel.
Yeah. And I noticed that it's available for $8.72 in the paperback format as of now. So
Right.
we'll give that a plug. And
I try to keep the prices as reasonable as possible.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's makes it easy for more people to get your work.
Right. And I know that many authors really hate Amazon, but none of the other websites where I've offered my books have ever paid me a penny.
Wow.
Amazon pays me every month. And they give me a sales report, how many of which books sold, how many Kindles, how many paperbacks, and now they will allow me to do a hardcover edition.
Yeah.
Interesting. Of course, if I do that, I'll have to go through whatever book I choose and fix the typos.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and Fallen Angels has a big blooper. I started reading it aloud on YouTube, and I suddenly realized that I had repeated an entire paragraph with only one change, and that was the name of the character.
Oh no.
Yeah.
That must have
a big dick.
That must have driven you batty.
Yes, but I haven't gone back and fixed it yet.
Well, if you ever need another pair of eyes, I'm your man.
Oh, thank you. I need to, once it isn't as fresh in my mind, I'm more likely to see the typos.
It's interesting. I've noticed as a writer myself that one tends to skip over one's own typos, but another person catches them more easily.
Yes, and the spell checker doesn't catch mine usually because it's like I write form instead of from, and they're both real words.
Yeah, that happens to me too. So let's go back to what you were mentioning about you believe that you were taught remote viewing when you were a child. Were you taught protocols and that sort of thing, or how did it work?
I don't remember protocols, but we did have pencil and paper. And sometimes it was multiple choice, and sometimes it was draw a picture of it, and sometimes it was just a blank piece of paper and write, what you're seeing in your mind. But it would be things like, what's in John's pocket, or what's in the box on the stage. It was held in our school theater. And one time it was what's in the bank vault downtown.
Wow.
And I remember there were 3 of them, 2 men and a woman. And the woman started yelling at me that I was deliberately giving wrong answers. Well, I was.
Why were you deliberately giving wrong answers?
I just had the sense that there was something wrong about these people and what they were doing.
Did you ever follow that up, or were you able to?
Other than reading the article in Scientific American, it was behind a PayPal, but I asked them for it based on the fact that I was a subject in the research, and they sent me the article in a PDF. But the article was only about the boys. But one of the boys was my brother.
Were the girls a control group or something?
Oh, I think it was just sexist garbage.
Yeah.
1968. The women's movement hadn't quite progressed to burning bras yet.
You know, I noticed uh, earlier this evening that Venus was out and it was incredibly bright. And
Oh,
I've had my share of UFO sightings, and I had to sit there and block out the light from nearby houses to look at it and make sure it wasn't moving because I don't think I've ever seen Venus as bright as it is tonight.
I saw it once. I was driving south on the Grapevine, the 5 freeway that runs all the way to Washington State. But I was coming home, so I was going south and down the hill. And I thought I saw a helicopter with a searchlight. It was Venus, and it was that bright. It seemed close, and it seemed brighter than the full moon, which was also up there, and almost as big as the full moon, and it was Venus. But I had to pull over on the shoulder and look at it carefully, and then I turned on the radio, and eventually the announcer on the radio on our big boomer KFI mentioned something about Venus being exceptionally bright that night. I used to visit family up north and go on long drives, but on one of them, I know I had missing time.
Let's hear about that.
Okay, once again, coming over the Grapevine, which is just north of Los Angeles. It's a big, steep hill both ways, up and down. I hit the Grapevine at about 1 to 1:30 in the morning. I was about 70 miles from home. And I was going 65 to 70. So I should have been home by 2:30, 3 o'clock at the latest. I got home at 6:30.
Wow.
I was so tired I just fell asleep thinking, that's weird.
Yeah, that's pretty strange. And what are your feelings about hypnoregression, about that experience?
I really don't think I want to try hypnotic regression.
Because
No
of
matter how good the interviewer is, you know, you want to please them.
mm-hmm.
And I might just come up with things that aren't real, but then I might believe them. I remember enough weird things on my own that, I really don't think E.T. ever abducted me, but somebody did.
Oh, really? Well, that's kind of what Into the Fringe is all about. So, do go on.
Well, it was usually when I was supposedly at school. But I find myself somewhere else with people talking at me or talking about me while I watched. And well, it wasn't every day or anything like that, but here and there until I was in my 20s. And they claimed to have a space program because we were at war out beyond Jupiter. And they showed me Jupiter on a screen, and I looked at it and said, that's not Jupiter, it has rings, it's got to be Saturn. That was 1970, and NASA probably knew that Jupiter also has rings. We just couldn't see them from a telescope on Earth. But I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think Edgar Casey also talked about rings around Jupiter, but they're very, very faint compared to those around Saturn. And I don't know that NASA knew about them in 1970 or not.
Well, they had space probes going all over the place, but I don't think they specifically looked for rings around Jupiter.
I think the Viking and Voyager probes were 1976, 1971, right?
Could be. But if they were telling the truth that we were at war with, they said someone from the outer solar system, it would explain a lot. But I don't know whether it's true. You know, people who abduct you are not necessarily truthful.
Right. Was there any external confirmation about you being abducted by a different group? Like, did your school report to your mother that you were not in class, or was this after school?
It would, apparently, they reported a lot more absences than I actually had. They marked me absent on days when I thought I was there.
So your mother thought that you were a truant?
No, she just thought they were crazy.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
She thought I was crazy too, but Mom was crazy.
Yeah.
That's another story. Everybody has some kind of childhood trauma, and mine is nowhere near the worst.
Oh, but it's not insignificant. That's certainly true.
Yeah. Just look in the dictionary under dysfunctional and you'll see our family portrait.
Although we're mostly going to be talking about your paranormal and UFO experiences, because you were married to Philip and he's such a foundational writer for science fiction, I hope you don't mind if I ask you some questions that will relate to his experiences as well. And I'd like to begin with, how did you and Philip K. Dick meet?
His girlfriend had dumped him and he was being clingy, so she was trying to find someone else so he'd leave her alone. Ginger was quite talkative. She said her main problem was that he was no good in bed. I don't know. Anyway, I was just bored. It was a Saturday, I think the 2nd or 3rd of July, and Ginger actually wanted my mother to come to this beach party, but Mom didn't want to. And I was bored, so I said, oh, I'll go. And that's where I met Phil. But we gave up on the beach. It was too crowded. So we went to somebody's house, had a barbecue, and Phil tried to get me drunk.
Why do you say he tried to get you drunk?
Well, he was pouring Jack Daniels and Coke, and I was just barely 18. Shouldn't drink at all, but I asked him to make mine weak because I was not used to alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I took one sip, and he'd made it really strong. And he got really angry when I poured it out on the lawn, wasting good booze.
Sure.
But I was not going to drink it. And by the way, I don't drink Jack Daniels.
What paranormal, perceived or tricksterish experience did you have, and did Philip have?
Trickster. Phil had a lot of those. See, and my own experiences prepared me to take his seriously.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know there's weird things in the sky, and I don't know what they are. I'd like to know, but I can't say for sure. And we never saw UFOs while we were together. But Phil did have that experience after having a tooth extracted under general anesthesia.
Mm-hmm.
And all the stories that people take for fact are really Phil's embellishment. He was weaving a story for his Phallus novel. The first one, which was actually Radio Free Albemuth, the last to be published, but it was the first one he wrote.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of what people think happened was his storytelling. But there was a pink beam. We were in a taxi cab because he could not drive after general anesthesia, and I don't think I had my driver's license yet.
You just had your learner's permit.
Yeah, so we took a taxi, so rather than pay the taxi to take us to the pharmacy, we asked the pharmacy to deliver his pain pills and antibiotics. And when the lady from the pharmacy came to the door, Sue got to the door before I did. He came running. And yes, the girl had a fish necklace, a little gold chain with a gold fish sign.
Mm-hmm.
And Phil did ask her about it, but he already knew. We had a sticker. It was a bumper sticker, but he had taped it up in our living room window. And it was a very silvery, shiny sticker. And after he got his medication and turned away, the sunlight coming off of that sticker blinded him temporarily. So this pink beam was the phosphine activity of his eyes reacting after the instant of blindness went away and he walked into the dark hallway. He was seeing an image of that fish sign sticker.
Mm-hmm.
Which of course is an early Christian symbol. It's the word fish in Greek letters.
Right.
But of course it was more dramatic for the novel to have the beam coming off of the girl's necklace. But that's a novel. It's not mundane reality.
Right.
But he went into the bathroom and got a glass of water and took 2 pain pills when he was supposed to take 1. And then he went to bed and started seeing these images on the white wall of our bedroom. Some of them in pink light and some of them not. So it was kind of eerie, but I put it down to the medication and the fish sticker until he started really delving into things like Greek myth and philosophy. And of course he had studied philosophy. He was an autodidact, self-taught.
Mm-hmm.
And as a youth, he had access to some really good libraries, like at UC Berkeley and the public libraries. And he would spend hours in the library just reading.
What can you tell us, Tessa, about your book, Remembering Firebright?
Well, it chronicles some of his experiences, like the pink light. And I wrote it before I became aware of all the
artistic license?
Yeah, especially the Something Brothers, the Fat Freddy artists. They did a comic of Bill's.
The Furry Freak Brothers.
That's it.
Hey, I remembered something.
Yay! Well, you get as old as I am, you're entitled to forget.
Oh, it's a big win for me, trust me.
And I did crack my skull about 11 years ago.
Ouch.
Slipped on the ice. Fell
Well,
over backward.
that doesn't help.
No. That's my excuse every time I make a mistake.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, Phil did diagnose our son's hernia, but not the way it happens in the novels.
Mm-hmm.
Our son was happily babbling while lying in his crib, and let's see, he would have been about 14 months old at the time, and Phil was taking a nap. He took many naps, and he did have some physical illnesses, conditions, not diseases.
Right.
Anyway, Phil, I was in the kitchen, and Phil got up and walked out to the living room, and he appeared to be in a trance. The way he walked and the way he spoke was not natural. And he just said, Chrissy has an inguinal hernia. Call the doctor and tell him. Oh, and he said, call Dr. Quack, because that's what we called him.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, so I did, and I made an appointment for a few days later. Took our son in, and the doctor examined him and said, yeah, he has an inguinal hernia, and referred us to a specialist, a surgeon. So about a week after that, we went and saw the surgeon, and he said he's too young to have the surgery. He has to be at least 18 months old. So don't let this baby cry. Because if he cries too much and gets upset and cries, the hernia could strangulate, and that could be fatal. So we had the most spoiled baby you ever saw, and no sleep, constantly picking him up and walking around. Oh, and I had a rocking chair which helped. I'd rock him until he finally got the surgery.
We have a couple people in the chat. One is Ivan Ivanovich, who said Voyager 1 reached Jupiter in 1979.
Wow.
So I think NASA probably didn't know about the rings around Jupiter in 70.
What about Pioneer? I think that was earlier.
Yeah, it was earlier. I would have to look it up. I will leave it to the folks in the chat to look it up.
In any case, it was not common knowledge that Jupiter had rings, and they showed me a picture of Jupiter, a motion picture on the screen, and I insisted it couldn't be Jupiter till they either moved a spaceship around or just ran the video forward. My feeling is it was just a video and I was not on a spaceship. Anyway, they showed me the red spot, the great red spot.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was Jupiter.
Our old friend Oswald Spengler is in the chat, and
Awesome.
he asks, what would Phil think of the concept of PSYOPs, and would he think UFO phenomenon fits under that category? Now, I realize that that's a really loaded question, and it could go a lot of ways. So, have at it.
Phil would be right on board with that because he was the victim of a, let's see, I don't want to say a bad word, a mind.
Oh, Tessa, you can fucking say whatever you want. It's cool.
Oh, but I have an image. Oswald is one of my loyal followers.
I know he is. And hello and hail to Oswald, by the way.
Is Wax Frog there?
Not yet.
Okay, well, anyway, yeah, Phil, from time to time over his entire life, complete strangers would talk to him as if they knew him very well, and usually they were offering advice or a warning. But mother-in-law who was staying at Phil's house, and one of them was a man who called himself Hal Kinchin, almost certainly not his real name, and Hal actually claimed to be part of an organization so secret that even the CIA didn't know about them. And he wanted to recruit Phil.
I'm sorry, Tessa. We had a momentary audio problem. Could you repeat your answer to Oswald's question?
The whole thing?
The last minute or so.
Okay. This acquaintance of Phil claimed to be an agent of an organization so secret that even the CIA did not know about them.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted to recruit Phil as a courier to carry messages abroad. Well, Phil refused, and Hal said, well, you know, they're going to kill you and replace you with a double if you don't cooperate. And he said they had even written some of his future novels for him.
Right.
Well, eventually, Phil's house, well, it was burglarized several times, but the main one on November 17th, 1971, Hal lured Phil and his girlfriend Stephanie out of the house, and while they were out, the place was ransacked and torn apart.
Mm-hmm.
Doorknobs were knocked off of the doors. His fireproof file cabinet was blown up with explosives. And what they took was bank statements, tax records, and manuscripts.
So they obviously wanted him to know that they had been there.
Oh, yeah. And they were not looking for money.
Right.
They might have been looking for drugs.
Is that what Philip thought?
Yes. All the food in the kitchen was dumped out on the floor. Cupboards, refrigerator, everything. It was a big mess. And while Phil and Stephanie were going out to meet Hal at a local coffee shop, their car broke down. So it took them a long time to get the car towed and to take a taxi home. And the cab driver refused to take them to their door. He said he was afraid to go down that street, and he let them out on the corner a block away.
How would the cab driver know to do that?
I have no idea. But there must have been witnesses to the ransacking of the house.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody would talk to Phil about it. And the sheriff advised him to leave town.
Doesn't that strike you as odd?
Oh, yeah. But I experienced something similar, although not as drastic, when I was a witness against a gang member who had done a home invasion. I was just a witness. He invaded the house next door. And basically the police advised me to leave town, so I did.
And I take it that you and Phil compared notes about that also?
Oh, this was after Phil passed away.
So what are your thinkings, especially regarding the correlation of those two things?
Well, it tells me that such things do happen. Although in my case, I know who did it and I know why.
Can you tell us more about that?
Oh, the guy was a Ku Klux Klan biker and a drug dealer who already had some felony convictions. He was found guilty, and he didn't get a whole lot of time, but he was already on federal parole. So when he finished his time in California, he went to a federal prison for violating parole.
Ah.
Yeah, so, and the judge in the local case ordered him never to enter California ever again. He was from another state, and he could just stay in his home state.
But evidently that wasn't enough.
Well, I've been safe ever since.
Oh, okay,
Fine with
good.
me.
I wasn't sure if you were talking about that as what happened after that or before.
No, but it was quite frightening. But they were basically trying to frighten us without getting arrested for witness suppression.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, for example, someone set off an M80 in our backyard. That's like a half stick of dynamite.
Right? Actually, I think it's a quarter stick of dynamite.
Oh, well, whatever it is. I think you're right. But whatever it was, I was in the bedroom with blackout curtains on the windows, and I still saw the flash.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Whatever. And I heard a motorcycle driving away.
Yeah. I'd like to switch gears briefly, Tessa.
Sure.
And I'd like to talk about what are called the starseed transmissions. Uri Geller, Robert Anton Wilson, Dr. Timothy Leary, and several other important writers and thinkers claim to have had the same sort of whole concept thought download as did Philip. And Robert Anton Wilson mentioned that a dozen people, including Philip, had experiences at the same time regarding life extension and intelligence intensification. And I'm going to play you a short clip from my interview with Robert Anton Wilson, and then I'd like you to give us your feedback regarding Philip.
Have you had any contact, imagined or real, with Dr. Leary since his passing? And what is your opinion on how we as a planet are living up to the call of the starseed transmissions?
Well, that's really two questions.
So I kind of wrote separate questions, maybe.
Well, a month after his death, I got an email from him. It said, "Dear Robert, how are you doing? I'm doing okay over here, but it's not what I expected. Too crowded. Love, Timothy." You can figure that one out for yourself.
Uh-huh.
And what was the next question?
What is your opinion on how we as a planet are living up to the call of the starseed transmissions?
I've got dead air.
Well, the first point was life extension. I think that research is proceeding nicely. Intelligence intensification, that's proceeding in a bumpy and indirect way. I think our computers will get smarter before we do, and then we'll learn from the computers. Mm-hmm. Research on the human brain to unleash creativity and more intelligence and so on is under a very heavy taboo. the government will give an okay to any drug that'll turn you into a zombie. If you got problems you want to solve, they'll turn you into a zombie. You get rid of the problems. And then you can join all the other Thorazine zombies wandering the streets. Any drug that unleashes creativity, joy, ecstasy, higher intelligence, they're very nervous about. They want a population very much like a herd of sheep. Very submissive, very easily frightened, and very, very timid. And so research on drugs that will turn us from sheep into human beings, they don't like it at all. As for space migration, that's slower than I expected. But right now there are 2 outfits that are planning to build hotels in space for conventions, business meetings, also parties, all sorts of gatherings.
Totally separate from L5, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but it's on the way to L5. Now, of course, the L5 idea is still around.
They're still unfinanced.
Yeah, still unfinanced.
Yeah.
But if I get another 50 years, I might live long enough to move to a space colony. It's a pleasant thought.
If they asked you, you'd go?
Oh, I'd leave tomorrow if they were ready.
Yeah, I thought
Who the hell wants to live in a country run by George Bush?
Yeah, amen, brother. Is it more or less important these days to be a paranoid? Is there more or less to be paranoid about?
So, Tessa, were you able to hear any of that?
Nope, I had dead air.
Okay. So, I asked him about the starseed transmissions, and as I mentioned before, he talked about the fact that it had to do with life extension and intelligence intensification. And he just gave us his thoughts about that. He seemed to think that intelligence intensification was moving along nicely, but that space migration was not. And I interviewed him in 2001. So at that time, we didn't have Virgin Galactic or, SpaceX or anything like that. What are your ideas, thoughts, recollections about that sort of whole concept thought download that Philip had?
Well, what I remember most clearly was his correspondence with Brad Steiger.
Mm-hmm.
Phil asked me to fill out this survey that, oh dear, I think her name was Francie, Steiger's
Okay.
wife. She had developed this survey, and depending on your answers to the questions, you might be a starseed, but, an alien. Sorry, I tripped and dropped the phone.
Happens to me all the time.
I think I cracked the screen, but I don't care.
Well, at least those can be repaired.
Well, anyway, depending on your answers to the survey, you might be an alien hybrid. I don't know.
And what did Phil have to say to you about this experience of his in 1974, which coincides with the other 11 important writers and thinkers that had this allegedly same whole concept thought download?
Well, he had, for one thing, he thought, well, he had people he could talk to who wouldn't just write him off as nuts, but some of them he thought were embellishing, just as he had done.
Right.
any case, he was kind of glad to know he was not alone. But he was really fascinated by the idea of alien hybrids. And my understanding is that this was not like, lizard people or little gray aliens, but actual humans,
Like
but not Earthlings.
like humans that had alien personalities in them or something?
Mm, Phil did have this concept of the ancient pagan gods.
Mm-hmm.
He was most familiar, of course, with Greek and Roman gods and goddesses, of them being like us, but a little superior. But there's also the concept that our ancient ancestors might have colonized other planets like Mars, and they were coming home. And in my own experiences, I was pretty much told that they had, partly because of, excessive radiation in space travel, and partly because they were such a small inbred population, they just could not reproduce anymore.
Right.
They had to mate with Earthlings, and we are the same species.
So his thought was that we are the Martians.
Pretty much. Mine too.
Mm-hmm.
I can agree with that, although I think we really lived on the planet that blew up, and Mars was its moon.
There certainly is a lot of thought and writing about that. I wanted to also ask you, what is your earliest memory of experiencing anything paranormal?
Oh, wow. Goes back to at least age 2 and possibly earlier. I had, many small children have imaginary friends,
Mm-hmm.
but mine was an angel, a adult man, but an angel that nobody else could see or hear. But he didn't do anything weird or say anything really weird. He just would give me common sense advice. Like, my dad's car would pull up in the driveway and he'd say, "Your daddy's home, you better get out of his chair so he can sit down. He's been working all day, he's tired." Stuff like that. Although I did get some advice about the demons that infested that house. And I thought it, when my brother mentioned it decades later, I thought he meant roof rats. And he said, no, that house was infested with demons. And that's when I realized, well, maybe they were demons. So I used to be terrified of the dark in that house, not in other places.
Mm-hmm.
And, when I was put to bed, I'd put the blankets over my face so the demons couldn't see me.
Right.
So at that time, I called them ghosts. I didn't know about demons.
Yeah. Another question that I wanted to ask you. Uh, how old were you when you saw your first UFO? And the same with Philip.
Okay, I was 6 years old. It was that red-orange glowing globe.
The one that's like basketball sized?
Oh, it was bigger than a basketball. It was at least the size of that bubble in The Prisoner.
Oh, Rover?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it was big. Of course, I was small, so it seemed bigger than it was. But,
Sure.
you know, it was huge. But other than that, I've seen weird things in the sky, but nothing as weird as that. For example, in Las Vegas, I just happened to be going down, I keep forgetting the name of the street, Sunset Boulevard,
Uh-huh.
by the McCarran Airport. Well, the Janet aircraft land at that part of the airport, and I saw one land. I had seen its landing lights, so being curious, I pulled over, parked the car against the curb and put down the windows, and that darn jet was completely silent. No noise.
And what about Philip's earliest UFO encounter?
Well, I don't know for sure, but there is always the Palmer Eldridge image in the sky. He would have been, close to 30 years old.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, he wrote a novel called The Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldridge, and it was inspired by this image he saw in the sky one afternoon. He was looking out toward the sunset, and he thought he saw a huge iron mask in the sky, kind of backlit by the setting sun. Kind of reminds me of Zardoz for some reason.
Yeah.
I'll watch almost anything with Sean Connery.
Right. Yeah, me too. As a matter of fact, I ordered the Blu-ray of Outland. Apparently, it's been amazingly restored and looks really good.
Awesome. I haven't seen that, actually.
Oh, wow. You're in for a treat. It's a great movie.
Well, I don't get out much, but if it's online, streaming, then I can watch it.
I'm sure it's on Amazon.com or one of those streaming services anyway.
Okay, I'll look for it.
I wanted to ask you if we could drill down into Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049. You wrote a book.
About that.
You wrote a book about Blade Runner 2049,
Well,
and
movies and the book.
right, and I wanted to get your opinion about Philip's opinion about the whole is Deckard a replicant conversation.
No, in Phil's mind, Deckard was completely human, And the real question was whether Rachel was really human and not a replicant at all.
Mm-hmm.
That she was the original and there were replicant copies of her, but the one who interacted with Deckard could have been an actual human, the original, and simply lacked empathy.
Now, there have been a lot of comic books written about Blade Runner 2019, which I'm showing on the screen now, and 2029, and
2049?
These are 2019 and 2029, and there's also a TV series that was put out in 1999 that's called Blade Runner 20. I'm sorry, it's called Total Recall 2070. It's a 1999 TV show that looks okay, but the writing is pretty good. And I was curious if you'd ever heard of it.
Nope. I have seen the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie.
Mm-hmm.
And friends have told me not to bother seeing the remake.
Yeah. Well, I was able to get a copy of Total Recall 2070, the pilot. I have the rest of the series, which only lasted for a year, on the way. And I have to say, so far, 2070, even though it's called Total Recall 2070, has a lot to do with replicants, as you might imagine. Or they're just called androids. They don't actually call them replicants. But
yeah, Phil called them androids. Replicant is Ridley Scott's name for them.
Exactly. And for a TV show that was made in 1999, it's obviously pretty low budget compared to the movie. It looks okay, but I thought the writing was worthwhile. And I wanted to ask you if you'd heard of it, and if you hadn't, maybe to turn you on to it.
Maybe.
Maybe I can.
Appreciate good writing.
Maybe I can mail you a copy.
That would be awesome.
You have a DVD player, right?
Well, it's built into the laptop. I have an actual DVD player too.
Well, there's one in your
Dinosaur TV that it plugs into.
there's one in your desktop as well.
Yeah, well, see, I hurt my back really bad, so I'm gonna have to get help because I'm not allowed to pick it up, and I'm not allowed to move my desk.
Right.
And it's kind of hard to get help around the holidays, but I'll get someone over to help me with it.
Maybe I can ask Walter if he can come over and give you a hand.
Oh, he isn't really that close by. I'm gonna try for someone local. This back injury is really messing up my plans.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
It is healing, and I don't have to have surgery, so that's a blessing.
It is.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned that everything that Philip K. Dick wrote was about something that actually happened to him, but that he added to with artistic license. Can you tell us about some of the experiences that inspired his books?
Well, there's the adjustment team. When Phil came home one evening, he'd taken his wife to the movies, and they came home and he reached. Now, he's told it different ways, but what I remember, the first time he said he reached for the light switch and it wasn't there. And then he finally remembered that you had to pull a chain that hung down from the the ceiling lamp to turn it on. But sometimes he said he reached for the chain and it wasn't there, and it had been changed to a light switch. And sometimes he said he was going into the bathroom to turn on the light. But in any case, it inspired the idea that people go around while you aren't there, and they change things. And or if you're supposed to be there, they'll also change you. Change your clothes, your job titles, stuff like that.
It seems like he was an early proponent of simulation theory.
Could be. His speech in Matt's France was pretty much spot on, although at the time people thought he had gone insane.
Yeah, and maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that. I asked Robert Anton Wilson when I interviewed him if it's a good thing to be paranoid or how paranoid maybe we should be. And I understand that Phil had a pretty healthy paranoia. What can you tell us about that?
Well, sure, he was paranoid, but he was right.
They really were out to get him.
Yep. Oh, yeah. After they hit on his house, he fled to Canada. He rented an apartment in Vancouver, British Columbia, planning never to come back to the United States. And one afternoon, I think, actually. Anyway, he had a headache, so he was walking down to the pharmacy to buy some aspirin. And he forgot what happened at first, but during his pink beam experience, most of the memories started coming back. And two men in black suits grabbed him off the sidewalk, shoved him into the back of a black limousine, and drove him around the streets of Vancouver. They were talking to him and questioning him, but he couldn't remember anything that was said. But in his original memory, he was walking down the sidewalk, and then suddenly he was in his apartment, sitting on the floor, and he had swallowed a whole bottle of sleeping pills. So he grabbed the phone and called for help. That was supposedly a suicide attempt, but I think they were trying to suicide him.
Yeah.
Just as Hal had predicted.
Right.
Remember? We'll just kill you and replace you with a look-alike.
Mm-hmm. And they already have the novels written.
Right. Very much like Radio Free Albemuth.
You know, I have to say, Tessa, I'm really curious to read the novels that they already had written, that they would have put out as Philip K. Dick books, because as a huge Philip K. Dick fan, I can't think of anyone in the science fiction community that could, especially at that time, have put out a Philip K. Dick book or short story that wouldn't have raised an eyebrow or made someone scratch their head. You know what I mean?
Yep. Well, yeah, they probably would not have been very good. But you never know. There was a parody in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
They ran a series of parodies of Tom Dish and Norman Spinrad, and there was one of Phil, a short story by Chip Dip K. Kill. And it was a parody, so of course it was quite hilarious.
Was that before or after Phil had passed?
Oh, this would be 1972 or 3.
So he got to read it.
Yeah.
What do you think he thought of it?
Well, he was trying to guess who had written it, the real name.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to know the real name, but I can't remember anymore. Maybe Sladek, but I'm not sure. I think his first name is John. I'm not that familiar with science fiction. I was never a fan. I do enjoy Phil's books.
We have a question from the chat. Ivan Ivanovich asks, why do you think the government was after Phil?
Well, there are several pointers, indicators. So I suspect that they thought he was a radical activist. First, he signed the petition in Ramparts magazine promising not to pay income taxes until we got out of Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
And he was one of about 50 people who had signed the petition, who had their cars taken by the IRS in lieu of, to pay off their taxes.
Right.
And then he just had a really innocent phone call from Dr. Timothy Leary, the, tune in, turn on, drop out guy with LSD.
Yeah.
Yeah, the guy was in John Lennon's hotel room where he and Yoko Ono were singing Give Peace a Chance.
That was where they were having their bed in?
Yeah, it was their second bed in. I think it was in Montreal. It's in one of my books somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, probably the one I'm still writing. Never mind. Oh, it might be in more on the exegesis.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, Leary just wanted to tell Phil that he was a big fan of his science fiction. And Phil said that John Lennon told him that the Beatles song Paperback Writer was about him.
Right.
But it was totally innocent, but then some months later, maybe a year, Dr. Leary escaped from prison. And I'm sure that nobody was tapping Phil's phone, but they certainly were tapping John Lennon's phone. And they probably came across Phil's phone number in Northern California, not too far from the prison where Leary had escaped. and they must have suspected that he was somehow connected to the, was it the weatherman who broke him out of prison? Someone helped him.
Might have been.
Leary changed out of his prison clothes in a gas station restroom, so someone must have brought him civilian clothes and then driven him away. Meanwhile, Phil is being harassed and threatened, and Leary's off to Europe to do the grand tour. And Phil never really knew why all this happened, and it didn't occur to me. I had no idea that the phone call was all that meaningful until I read something about how the journalist Paul Williams was also there when they recorded Give Peace a Chance. Well, Paul Williams was a friend of Phil's. That's how they got Phil's phone number, so Leary and Lennon could talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it all kind of comes together, and it's circumstantial, and it is not definite proof, but it makes sense to me.
I'd like to take a bit of a left turn and ask you about the owl in daylight. The book says things are not as they appear, and the owl is mentioned a great deal in the abduction literature as a screen memory, and in the TV show Twin Peaks,
The owls are not what they seem.
the owls are not what they seem. Exactly. What can you tell us about the owl in daylight?
Well, not a whole lot. Phil planned to write that book, but he died too soon. And he did kind of suggest a plot to his agent and his editor. The editor was David Hartwell. I guess the agent was Russ Galen. And I had read a copy of that letter. But of course, in an interview with some friends, mutual friends, he had spun out a completely different plot line, and I had not seen that interview. And I really thought the book should be written, but his daughters didn't think so.
So
So
that book doesn't exist,
the book no longer exists.
but it did.
Well, there were 50 copies, and I told them at the time I can't recall them. People bought them.
Oh, interesting.
So they're out there somewhere.
So, a little bit later, we're going to do our giveaway, and that is of Blade Runner creator Philip K. Dick.
Oh, earlier you said Conversations.
Blade Runner creator, yeah.
Okay.
And
That's
from the
what I
blurb,
thought originally.
that one says, Blade Runner 2049 shows us a world devastated by war and threatened by a power-mad creator of artificial humans. This sequel to the 1982 film Blade Runner suffered from a misguided marketing campaign and contradictions in the plot lines, but it succeeds in showing us the stark beauty of scarred landscapes and deteriorating city streets. Humans live alongside replicants, and they buy virtual friends to combat loneliness. Behind the slick facade of brightly lit animated billboards, many people live in poverty in the future city of Los Angeles, which reflects the state of things today. The story began with a novel by an obscure science fiction author who lived in poverty for most of his life. His dark vision of the future became widely known after Ridley Scott's Blade Runner was released in 1982, but sadly Philip K. Dick died before the film was shown in theaters. His genius is finally recognized, but it is too late for him. Now, I know that Ridley Scott or his team was able to show Philip kind of a sizzle reel of the special effects, and that he was very pleased.
Well, they called it rushes, so it was more than just special effects.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I have to placate the cat or she won't quit howling at me.
Oh, please do.
I have to get out the laser pointer.
It's not hard to understand why the ancient Egyptians regarded cats as gods.
Well, they are, aren't they?
I think so. I've always had a cat, except for in the last few years of my life. But
it's nothing quite like waking up with a cat staring into your eyes.
yeah, that's true. I also wanted to ask you, are there any UFO or paranormal events that we haven't covered that you think that we should?
Well, we don't have a whole lot of time left. I'd just say that Phil didn't just see things and hear things. He also studied voraciously, and he already knew a great deal about philosophy and the goddesses of the pagan world of Greece and Rome. But he didn't have access. You know, there was no internet, and he had so many phobias, he rarely went out, so he didn't spend a lot of time in the library.
Mm-hmm.
So his resources, his primary resource was the Encyclopedia Britannica, and academics look down on that. They want you to go to the peer-reviewed literature.
Sure.
Well, I don't care if you're even upper middle class, you can't afford to subscribe to those things. You have to go to a university that has them in the library.
Another question that Oswald Spengler has is, would Phil agree with Mike Clelland's interpretation of owls and symbolism/mythology through a Jungian lens? Mike Clelland, of course, wrote the great book Messengers about owls and screen memories. So how do you think you would answer that question?
Well, I'm not sure. He began, with the phrase that's common in the American South. If you don't see something or don't understand something, you're as blind as an owl in daylight.
Right.
So I think it's a sort of reversal in Phil's mind. Instead of the owl giving you screen memories, you are the owl, and
of course.
so the owl has been given screen memories.
Mm-hmm. Only Philip K. Dick would think of that.
Yep. anyway, back to Blade Runner. It simply had the 2049. It simply had the wrong director.
You think so?
He's an artiste.
An auteur?
Yeah, he's a French-Canadian auteur, an artiste. And his scenes are beautiful. He must have had a good cinematographer and a good eye for what you can show on the screen. But it's 3 hours of dusky orange landscapes and dark blue interiors, occasionally punctuated by a moment of violence.
Yeah.
And in one scene where Officer K is having a knockdown, drag-out fight with a replicant, you can't see what's happening. It's too dark. But, you know, it would have been a great movie at 2 hours. Or if there were an intermission halfway through so people could go to the restroom and buy some more snacks.
Yeah. It certainly was a feast for the eyes.
Yeah.
But your assessment is it didn't pass your sniff test.
Well, too many plot holes. Good thing I was alone. And not in a theater. I kept yelling, continuity,
Yeah.
because there wasn't any. The biggest one was when Love went to the police station to use their computer to find Officer K. Well, about an hour earlier, they had already established that the police could not find him. But Love could find him because he had bought his virtual girlfriend from the corporation that Love worked for.
The Wallace Corporation.
Yeah. But I guess they needed a scene of violent, really grisly murder. But it didn't fit. It didn't make sense to me. I guess, you know, I might not have caught as many slips if I hadn't watched it 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
But I did notice that one immediately. Even so, it isn't a bad movie, but it failed at the box office. And I don't fault the first Blade Runner film. It did fail, but it was up against E.T.
That's true.
They didn't have a chance.
And it's certainly a cult classic at this point.
Oh yeah, you know what saved it financially was the VCR.
Yep.
It made its money on videotape, and now it makes even more on DVD and Blu-ray.
Why do you think that movie, Blade Runner, the original, has so much staying power?
They actually worked very hard to tell a story. Even though the original script just made Phil cry in anguish, it was car chases and shootouts.
Mm-hmm.
But the finished product would have been, he would have loved it.
You think so?
He did get to see a revised script.
Oh, that's good.
But the way they treated him at first, someone sent him a copy of the screenplay, and he was horrified and started complaining. And I don't know which particular person, but someone from the film production called Phil and demanded to know, how did you get that script?
Yeah, like it was his fault.
Well, like he shouldn't see the screenplay of his
Of his book?
movie?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but he did know about the origami animals. So
Oh,
I
he
know
did?
yeah, I know he saw more than special effects.
Do you happen to know what his thoughts about that were?
Well, he was delighted because, of course, for the most part, the film left out the animals and the Mercer box and empathy. It was a really brilliant touch. I've heard, and I'm not sure that it's true, but I've heard that the actor, sorry, I forgot his name too, but the actor playing Deckard's partner came up with that.
Edward James Olmos?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard that too.
Anyway, we have a book to give away, don't we?
We do. And before we do, I wanted to ask you if you could give us any thoughts on more on the exegesis of Philip K. Dick. I realize it's a big question and we don't have much time, but it's a work in progress.
Right. I'm really slowed down by life, and people kept begging for the book, so I released a very short excerpt on Kindle, and then later the more on the exegesis is on Kindle and paperback, but it's only 70 pages. And it covers the incident about Dr. Leary and John Lennon and the Ramparts petition, but it also goes into Gnosticism and the shape of the cross. Phil thought Christ was crucified on a cross shaped like the letter X, but it couldn't have been. He just wanted it to be like the X in Ichthus, and actually, that isn't actually an X, but it looks like one. You know, the fish sign.
Right.
But anyway, he really did absorb some Gnostic ideas, but I don't think he could rightfully claim to be a Gnostic, even though Gnostics are happy to accept him as one of their own. I think he was a heretic in every religion. But he spent hours and hours talking to the Episcopal priest. Despite his phobias, he was able to walk across the street to the Episcopal church.
All right. Well, we only have a few minutes left, and I'd like to go ahead and begin the giveaway. So, what I would like you to do, Tessa, is to please pick a number between 1 and 10 and just hold it in your mind and psychically reach out to the people in the chat. And I would like everyone in the chat to enter a number between 1 and 10. And the one that gets closest without going over will be the winner of our giveaway, Blade Runner creator Philip K. Dick, autographed by Tessa.
Oh, autographed.
You can do that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't broken my hand yet.
Very good. So we have Ivan Ivanovich in at 4. Carol's Cookies in at 7. Don McDouglas has a 6. The Edge of Time will need to pick another number. Oswald Spengler has number 3. Monster Huntress Room has number 7, which Carol's Cookies already picked, and The Edge of Time already picked. Heinlein's Bootstraps is number 3. And now we have Heinlein's Bootstraps at number 8.
Tora, get out of my dinner. Bad cat.
All right, Monster Huntress has picked 9.
Are we done?
We're getting close. Anybody else? Edge of Time has picked 1. Monster Huntress has picked 9.
Tora, get out of my stuff. Bad cat. Alright.
And Paul has picked 12, but can pick 10 if he would like.
How many people are in chat? Maybe there aren't enough numbers.
We have 10 people available to get a number. All right, Paul has picked number 10.
The number's already been picked.
Okay, and what is it?
7.
7.
Yeah, and 3 or 4 people guessed it.
Monster Huntress Room. Congratulations. So here is what I need for Monster Huntress Room to do. Contact me at gil@sunflower.com or on Twitter I am at Gil Bavel. Please send me your information and I will pass that along to Tessa so that she can send you your book. Congratulations.
Wow.
And I want to thank you again, Tessa, for such a wonderful show. It's always an honor and a blast talking to you. And I'm really glad that we got to talk about some of your paranormal and UFO experiences. And look forward to having you back on Into the Fringe soon.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Great.
Especially if I can manage to get a better internet connection.
That would be great.
Oh, I'll be talking to Spectrum.
Well, give them a piece of my mind because there's not very much of it left.
Well, I'm unhappy with Verizon, which of course is really Ma Bell. The old Bell telephone.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And in the chat, the Edge of Time says, please come again, Tessa.
Oh, I will. It's an awesome honor to have so many people interested in what I have to say.
And the chat seems to feel the same way back at you.
Oh, thank you.
So we will look forward to having you back on. And until next time, it's Cardinal Sin